Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Canadian Rock. This is Jamie Gray. This pod, we're talking to Kevin Brenders for our local legend series, which this week features the Oakville Crusaders. Before we get to Kevin and that awesome chat, just a little bit of a plug. Remember, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search up Canadian Rock. We're on the email at thecanadianrock@gmail.com. Drop us a line if you want any news or information. And remember that we're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Google Podcasts, CastBox, and the YouTube to watch, listen, follow, subscribe, give feedback, and share these great stories of some great Canadian ruggers. And lastly, if you're not sure where to go or you want to direct somebody to my pods, we're on, we have our own website. Sorry, I had a brain freeze there. thecanadianruck.weebly.com. What's going on in the world of rugby news right now? Well, there's been a few things, and this one I find really exciting. Canadian Rugby Players Association. How great is this? CPRA states they stand for protect, promote, represent, and develop. And how they want to help and where they want to look after their players is their well-being, their career, their education, life skills, and vulnerabilities of Canadian rugby players. This is from their website. To enhance the lives of Canadian rugby players who will unwaveringly dedicate themselves to our country and the continuous improvement of our sport, both on and off the field. That's pretty awesome. This new program is set up by some great Canadians: Jeff Hassler, Laura Russell, Alicia Allaire, Brett Bukaboom, Ben Lesage, Timothée Ogunjimi, Doug Fraser, Pam Buisa, Caroline Crosley, Andrew Coe, and Liam Underwood. It's a great initiative with goals of helping future, current, and former Canadian rugby players. Good on all of you guys for taking up this flag. Now we've got, this one's pretty neat, Crowley to Italy. Well, he's already in Italy. Former Canadian coach Kieran Crowley is going to be heading up the Azuris. He's their new coach. He's been coaching Italy since 2012 after an 8-year stint with Canada as their head coach, as our head coach. Crowley leading them to the 2023 Rugby World Cup. This comes after 32 straight losses in the Six Nations. Crowley stated this on the opportunity: "I'm honored that the FIR have given me the opportunity to lead Italy to the next World Cup. In the 5 years with Benetton Rugby, I've been able to learn and understand the country and its rugby culture, an understanding which I cannot wait to develop as head coach of the national team." Good on you, Kieran. Hopefully you can help turn around a dreadful Italian side as they prepare for the next World Cup. I like this as well. South Africa looks like they're rejoining the Rugby Championship. It's looking like it. After taking last year off, it looks as though South African rugby is set to return this summer. South Africa at the moment is going to be hosting Argentina on August 14th, 1 week after the final Lions tour match for their first match of the championship. Obviously, the COVID could play havoc on this tourney again, but that's a wait-and-see game at this point. As a fan, I'm excited to see South Africa back in action in this tourney. Watching the Boks square off against the All Blacks is one of the best things in any venue for a rugby fan to see, regardless of where you're from or who you follow. Next up, we've got World Rugby innovative eye tracking tech for concussions. This trial program has been set up through World Rugby, and they've partnered with New Zealand Rugby, Rugby Australia, and Neuroflex to help with this concussion testing program. So far, the trial has been started in the Trans-Tas competition. The VR, so if you're on YouTube, you'll see a player testing the VR. It's based off scientific information and data that gathers information within seconds to detect and help detect and diagnose and manage a concussion. This is being used in conjunction with a current HIA model, which is reportedly working at a 90% accuracy rate. Throw the 6-stage return to play model in, and this looks like a positive tool for rugby. World Rugby Chief Medical Officer Dr. Falvey stated, "As a key element of our progressive approach to injury reduction and management, rugby continually explores and assesses technology developments that could enhance the care of our players in our sports, from community rugby to the elite competitions." Looking after the safety of the players, to me, is the utmost importance in keeping rugby viable. As a guy who sustained 10 concussion and is still dealing and recovering from the effects of one from 2 months ago, this seems like it is another layer of helping the fight against concussions. Not only will this be good internationally, professionally, but it's also going to be very beneficial at the grassroots level, as parents are now going to see how serious rugby is about keeping players safe on the pitch. What's going on in MLR this weekend? Well, there are a lot of actions. Wednesday, there was a midweek game that saw the LA Galtinis beat the Austin Gilgronis 17-3. And the rest of the matches are slated for the weekend. You can watch them on the Rugby Network or just on the Rugby Network because the Arrows aren't playing. Saturday, Utah Warriors are on the road visiting Kyle Bailey in the NOLA Gold with an 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Doug Frazier's Old Glory is traveling to Houston to face the SaberCats, and that's also an 8 p.m. kickoff. Sunday, the New England Free Jacks are in the Big Apple to square off against Rugby United New York. That's 4 p.m. Eastern. And Matt Heaton and Rugby Atlanta are in Seattle to play the Seawolves. That one's an 8 p.m. Eastern start time. Also, my other favorite set of rugby is Super Rugby, and the Super Rugby Trans-Taz is happening this weekend. There's been a couple of games already as I record. The Hurricanes beat up on the Rebels 35-13, and the Highlanders beat the Western Force 25-15. But Saturday, so these games, some of the scores might pop up as you're listening to this podcast. Blues are facing off against the Waratahs. The Chiefs are playing the Brumbies. And lastly, Rugby Australia winner Reds with Brad Thorne as their coach are facing off against the Aratora champs Crusaders, and Razor is their coach. So those two used to play together, and now they're squaring off in a fierce match. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch that one. All right. So as you tune up and watch those games, you're cracking a beer, but maybe you're cracking a coffee. And the coffee for you is East Coast Roast Coffee. It's an independent micro coffee roaster in St. John, New Brunswick. What microbreweries are to beer, and I love a good microbrewery beer, East Coast Roast is to coffee, and it is delicious. They source from independent farmers and co-ops all over the world and roast in small batches to bring something interesting to the local coffee scene. If you're into really fresh coffee, you can head on over to their site at eastcoastroasts.ca or pick up beans from Jeremiah's, the Paris Crew, Art Warehouse, or Woodchucks in St. John. And just recently actually mailed out 2 4 prizes. So Ryan Martin in New Brunswick received a fresh bag of coffee beans, and Travis Larson of the San Diego Legion won a bag, and I shipped his off to him a few days ago. So hopefully he receives that within the next week. Coming up now is Kevin from the Oakville Crusaders. Let's jump in. So we've got Kevin with us from the Oakville Crusaders. The Oakville Crusaders were recommended by Matt Tierney. Matt never actually played for the Crusaders, but his siblings did, and he spoke very highly of what the Crusaders do for their community, what they do for rugby in Oakville. So, Kevin, welcome to the Canadian Ruck.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really looking forward to it, and Matt's always very generous with us when he comes back to visit.
Awesome. All right, so let's start off a nice, easy one here. Let's give us some history of the Crusaders. What can you tell us about Crusaders that people don't know about, or maybe people do know about?
Okay, well, we're a pretty well-known club in Ontario. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary as an organization 3 years ago. Actually, originally started out as the Mississauga Crusaders. So we were just over the border in Mississauga. It was started by, as many clubs were, a bunch of expats and a few Canadians sprinkled in there. And they used to play basically in a field near Sheridan area in Mississauga. And they would have socials in garages and move around from garage to garage, as a lot of clubs do. Late 80s, they got a hold of some land in Oakville and then became known as the Crusaders Rugby Club, or to a lot of people, the Oakville Crusaders. And soon thereafter, a clubhouse was built. And not long after that, sometime around 94, 95, a big extension to the deck over the field was built, and that added a lot of culture to the club. And it was around the time that the club really started to expand. Also around the mid 90s, we took on a women's team, which was very, very important to the culture of our club. I think we'll talk about that a bit later. We developed minis programs. We've had some wonderful club ancestors who put a lot of work into getting these programs going. And
that's great.
The mini program was a great complement to the senior program and the juniors. And then we've just sort of gone from strength to strength from there. So really based on a really fun time. And it's grown into quite a large club by not only Canadian standards, but international standards too.
That's great. When you mentioned when you guys built the clubhouse, that's I know, here in St. John, in the St. John area out here in New Brunswick, the Trojans have been fundraising to have a clubhouse. And one of the things that you notice with rugby, especially at the club level, if they have a clubhouse, it seems like there's a bigger drawing card. There's something that just a little bit more magic, I think, maybe behind the scenes when you can have a clubhouse that it really enhances the rugby thing. So can you talk to us about what that did for the Crusaders?
Well, it is huge. It gives us a home base, and there's a number of clubs around Ontario that have clubhouses. And I think the club and the park setting offers a wonderful environment for players to go and play a game, play in front of. Yeah, it's been great. It's allowed us not only to you know, run different events at the bar, but it's allowed us to host big games. England counties we're in. We host a number of touring sides every year. It allows the tour operators to say, hey, if you go to the Crusaders, we know that they'll put on a good feast for you. You know, they can house you right there, and there's proper change facilities, shower facilities, etc. So yeah, that was a real turning point for our club, and to those alumni who put it together, we owe them a great debt of gratitude.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great stuff. Let's talk about where you guys are located. You're pretty close to Toronto. Oakville's a pretty good sized city.
Yep.
There's tons of activities. There's sports. There's Leafs, Raptors, Blue Jays. There's a ton of different activities. What do you guys do to make sure you have members that are staying engaged with the club, helping the club, growing the club? Like you mentioned, you have people that are running minis and, retired people that are helping with fundraising, with Clubhouse, et cetera. What do you guys do to make sure that continues to happen?
Well, you know what? We strategize over this stuff all the time. We talk about this stuff all the time. For current membership, and recruiting new people, we're obviously using social media, positive social media posts through Instagram, through Facebook, getting our messaging out, trying to get our what our club culture is about through social media. Just really trying to stay engaged with the kids, especially during COVID, but in regular times as well. The town, we're lucky we have a lot of support, actually. Oakville's a wonderful place to raise a family and to live. There are huge sports organizations. There's the professional ones that you mentioned, but there's also, one of the largest hockey clubs in town. We've got a very large soccer club in town. Lacrosse is big here. Gymnastics is huge here. So I can go down the whole roster, and all those sports receive wonderful support from the town of Oakville. It's a big part of who we are. And rugby in particular actually gets support because the town recognized that when someone's looking to transfer to another community, whether it's from British Columbia or Halifax to the Greater Toronto area, or from South Africa or Argentina, what's the first thing that a rugby mad person does? Is they of course Google search, hey, if I move my family there, will they still get that rugby experience that we want? So we've been using social media to tell our story, how much support we get locally, and use it to promote the program and entice people to come out.
Do you run the social media account, or do you have somebody that's tabbed to do that stuff?
We've actually got 6 or 7 of us who all chip in on it. So we have Angela Donovan Jackson, who we've asked to do a lot of. She leads up our Women in Sport initiative. So anything related to that, she'll chip in with some things. One of the minis moms, Lucy, she posts a lot of stuff about the minis. I do a lot of the junior and the programming stuff. Chris Tudor Price, who's our treasurer, he chips in on stuff. So it's really a combined effort, and we try to cover the different parts of the club as well. We also separated our junior social media from our senior social media, and I think that allows the seniors to have be a little bit sillier with their social media than we would, which is fine. We recognize that ours is engaging, younger kids, and we want to be respectful of that, and parents of younger kids. So yeah,
that's good. Yeah, running a social media account for a club your size would be a full-time job, I imagine. So that's
we started a YouTube channel, and we've got a lot of games on there. We want clubs who are thinking about touring to the area and to recognize that, hey, there's a reasonable standard of rugby there, and it looks like a good club and a good place to visit. So a lot of our games are videoed and put on our YouTube channel, and we found that's been very helpful as well.
That's great. So you've got the positivity on social media. What are some of the other positive things that are all through Crusaders? Like what else do you guys do?
Well, we've had wonderful people running our programs. I've been around myself since the mid 90s, off and on, depending on where I was with kids and work and those types of things. We've had wonderful people running our programs, but we really did change some of our mindset about 5 years ago, when a group of us thought, you know what, the rest of the world is changing the way they play. They're changing the way they develop players, whether it's physically or just in terms of skills and applying those skills. So we needed to adapt. So we think a lot of the exciting stuff that we are doing is been pretty progressive. I will say we copy a lot of stuff. We watched a video by a guy named the Water Boy out of Australia and New Zealand, and that had a big effect on us. Those were just basically highlight videos. But one of the things someone noted was, boy, they're scoring in different ways than what we score. And I'll encourage anyone who hears this to go check out the Water Boy, his YouTube videos.
Not
but
the Adam
it was all
Sandler
about
movie.
Pardon?
Not the Adam Sandler movie?
The first thing that comes up is the movie. It's not the movie. No. Although that's the first thing that comes up when you search it.
It's a good movie, though.
But it's a wonderful movie. Yeah. And the videos are good too. But, we just noticed, they were playing a different style of game, and we thought it was fun, and we thought the kids would enjoy it. And at the end of the day, the kids are our customers. And whether that kid is 25 or that kid is 7. So we wanted to change a little bit some of our mindset. We also copied a lot of stuff off USA Hockey, the American development model. So I'm a hockey coach as well, just like most Canadian dads. You get pulled in behind the bench. And I thought the ADM really covers off a lot of amazing stuff for coaches who really just don't have time or the experience to have done it themselves. Right. They cover nutrition and sleep and small area games and those types of things. So we took both of these things, the idea that we had to change the type of rugby player we were developing, and then how we went about doing it from the USA ADM program. And we married those together. So we developed a basically cradle to grave development program for kids starting at 6 years old and working all the way up. So to produce a rugby player that can do the things we want them to do at 22, 23, we wanted to figure out what do they need to be doing at 6, 8, 10, what do they need to be doing at 16, 18, 20, et cetera. And then what kind of environment do we want them developing in? So I can go on that, but a lot of it's around a lot of gameplay, because that's fun, right? A lot of focus on individual skill development, and we built programs around that. And then at the end of the day, we wanted to make it a good learning environment. We wanted the kids to take chances. We wanted them to learn from their mistakes, but we certainly didn't want them to not take chances and not make mistakes. In fact, we encourage mistakes, just learn from them.
That's good.
And it allowed us as coaches to actually treat the kids differently and communicate with them differently. It allowed us to a real freedom to, as opposed to always being no, don't do this, don't do that. We rarely use those words. It allowed us to actually have more fun ourselves. Yeah. And we just had to accept the fact that mistakes are going to happen. And what it produces, and what it produces is, we notice at the junior level that when we move the ball 100 times, so for a typical U17, U18 game, when we make 100 passes a game, we're effectively, unbeatable or very difficult to beat, right? So it kind of brought this idea into our heads that, evasion, offload, ruck. So we want the kids to always think, hey, can I beat somebody one-on-one, right? And those are skills that we work on. All right. If I can't do that, can I keep the ball alive, keep it off the ground, right? Even if that means it's a 60-40 ball, right? Can we keep that ball alive? And then our last option is ruck. So we use those little cues with kids to say, hey, let's have fun, try some different things. Let's play as fast as we can and keep the ball alive. And so those types of mindsets, we started to implement about 5 years ago. And then we started to layer in individual skill development. So there's lots of eyes in team at our park. So, a team is made up of 15 individuals who are pretty darn good. And so we focus on building up those individual players. We have a strength and conditioning program. We do run kicking clinics. We run scrum clinics. We have a speed clinic. We do winter academy. So we want our kids touching the ball, making decisions, as I said, keeping the ball alive, being good individual players. And it, like I said, it just changed the mindset about 5 or 6 years ago. And we've been having a lot of fun with it ever since.
That's cool. Like, you've got a very vibrant U16, U18 program. How many U18 players would you have, like, right up from 6 to 18? Like, what do you guys run?
Oh, I wish Chris were here, because he's always got
come on, Chris. Where are you, Chris?
At hand. I just kind of throw ideas at him. He implements them. But
I'll tell you what, Kevin. If you and Chris come to New Brunswick to visit, I'll treat you to some beer, but not Chris. He stood us up.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Yeah. You know what, we've got at our U14 level for boys, I think we ran 4 teams the last time things were normal. We had 30 girls with a very committed coaching group, wonderful coaching group at U14. So that was pretty good, and they play 7s and 10s. Okay. And then at U16, we would run 3 teams for boys, and normally 2 teams for girls. We would anticipate running 2 teams for U18 girls and 2 teams for U18 boys so for U18 in a normal year. So how many teams is that? That's a fair number.
4, 5, 6, 7, like 10 or something. I don't know. I lost count.
Yeah.
I'm not a math teacher.
Yeah. So it's a pretty large group. Yeah. It allows us to have very dynamic training sessions where we can put kids in competitive situations with one another. And we do a lot of, as I mentioned before, we do a lot of decision making and team play or decision making to reinforce our catch pass skills. And when you have lots of numbers, you can do lots of modified games. So
absolutely. So you're not just a rugby club, you're a business. Like, you're training these young athletes from the age of 6 up in the Crusaders way, right? So when they graduate out of high school and they stick around with your club, they're playing the same way that they've learned, because you guys are developing a system that's based on the individual and how they compete, but all within that team, or all within that team frame, that framework of the team.
So our most important age groups are actually U6, U8.
Getting them hooked.
So, yeah. So on Saturday morning, on occasion, you can find me kind of, even though my boys are older, you can find me on Saturday mornings, much to my wife's chagrin, running around with 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. But those are our most important age groups. And we have 2 entry points. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah. We have 2 entry points. So you can either join our mini rugby program, right? And at U6, they just kind of run around internally, just that group. And if we can get 15 kids out at U6, then the rest takes care of itself as they come through the program. It just grows from there. They won't necessarily go to tournaments or jamborees or anything like that. They'll just have fun. Yeah. Rugby. Then the other entry point is our camp program. So we'd always run camps for high school kids, thinking that and we outsourced those camps to a third party, and that third party was a good partner, but we had to bring those in-house. And we evolved the age of the campers. So now we have camps running from U6 to U12, right? All summer, 8 weeks. And that's like daycare. It's like a day camp, right? And they might do rugby for an hour and 20 minutes a day, right? But then they'll do slip and slide, capture the flag, adventure walk, water balloons.
Right.
And then they get in the car with their parents, and then they say, I don't really know what rugby is, but that was amazing, right? Can you sign me back up? So what we find is that the signups from our summer camps are like 90%. So a kid attends our summer camp, has a great time, and then says, I actually want to try rugby like with these kids all the time. And so I don't care as a director if a child says, I want to do mini rugby for the whole summer, 2 days a week, or I want to do 2 weeks of day camp, rugby day camp. It's almost the exact same amount of time on task and introduction to rugby. It's super fun. So that's our 2 entry points really, really early, and we need to execute on those. We need to kind of feed the system with value added, programming at those ages. So
very vibrant, a lot happening there. Who runs these programs? Is it club members? Do you hire students? What's the business side look like? Because there's a lot of moving parts there that I wasn't aware of with you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah, yes, and yes. So it is overseen by very, very committed volunteers, and I'm just one of them. We have a wonderful dynamic board. You do have to really dig into the structure of the board to figure out how we sort of run these things. But we have a group of us that oversee the mini camps, and then we have a camp director, and then we have an associate camp director, and then we have 2 counselors and a number of volunteers. So in Ontario, you need a certain number of volunteer hours in order to graduate from high school. So the camp counselors are generally either grade 12s or university students. And then we have some of the young high school students who act as volunteers for the little kids. And we use the Canada Summer Jobs Program to help us with hiring for those camp counselors. And that's a program that I think everyone should contact their provincial union about how getting Canada Summer Jobs programs into your club can help your club. So
that's amazing. So there's lots happening there. It's awesome. I was going to ask you, what do the Crusaders do to help rugby sustainability? But I think you just answered that over the last 7-8 minutes. Is there anything else like that you want to talk about with those programs? How those kids stay involved right up into the senior levels? Like, are there any other tricks that you can share?
Yeah. So we've figured out that, and we're like any other rugby club, like it's predominantly played in the summer in Canada. So people have vacations. So we're pretty loose about, hey, if you go away for 2 weeks, we'll see you in 2 weeks, right? Like we don't get too squirrely about that. But, you know, there's a couple things. When I was playing with the club and actively involved, we had a hockey team through the club that ran all throughout the winter. And that was a great way to stay in shape, but more importantly, it kept all the guys together. So there was no way at the end of the men's league hockey season, there was no way that any guy on that team could get away with not signing up for rugby in the spring because the peer pressure was too hard. And it's the exact same thing with the kids in our winter academy program. So we really do run 11 months of the year now, and the kids can a la carte pick what they want to be involved in, or the parents can pick what they want to be involved in. So, but by running programming 11 months of the year, the kids these are their best friends, right? They really enjoy each other. We go on little tours together. It's a big part of what we do. Mm-hmm. The winter program is a way for kids to stay connected with each other. If they don't show up for a couple of weeks, well, it doesn't cost that much money to participate in our academy program. But hey, they come back and it's, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? Yeah, okay, let's get out there and chuck the ball around. Like they really are really, really good friends. And by running programming that kids can pick and choose, 11 months of the year, it just keeps everyone really, really connected. So we have really high return to rugby rates. And if someone doesn't come back, which is fine, the kids can choose to do what they want. They have other interests. We pick up the phone and we call them, and we call the parent and we ask, hey, is this person coming back out? Is your son or daughter coming back out? Why isn't she coming back out? Is something we can do better? So at the end of the day, it's hard work, right? And we just try and stay connected. The other thing we're trying is, when they switched the age grades to U19, they probably did that in New Brunswick as well for a couple of years. We integrated the U19 into the senior men's training a couple nights a week.
That's good.
And we wanted to sort of take away that intimidation factor, although some of those U18s, U19s were pretty big kids. So I think the intimidation factor could have been going the other way as well. But, we allowed, at that point, those kids were they had already set the standard. They were already setting their training. They were running practices effectively themselves. But by integrating them into the senior men, it really allowed them to get to know the guys and start to enter into our third team, second team, and start to work their way up through the grades at an early stage. And we think that was starting to form some friendships and connections. And unfortunately with COVID, we didn't get to see what the end result was, but we're going to try that again.
That's awesome. Hopefully that works out.
Yeah.
All right. So let's I'm 44 now. I haven't played rugby in 17, 18 years. I still love it, coach. I love being around the game.
Yep.
If I was in my mid-20s and I had moved to Ontario, what would you guys like? Matt, as I said earlier, Matt Tierney, who plays for Canada, he plays for Castover in France, spoke very highly of your club and never played for them. What would you do to make me want to play for you guys as opposed to one of the other local clubs?
Oh, you know what? Though that's a tricky question because they'll all listen to this at some point. So first of all, the first thing I want to say is Matt hasn't played for us yet. Okay. So we are going to squeeze a year out of Matt, whether he likes it or not. And he's a great guy actually, and it's nice to see him around the park. And the kids still talk about when he helped them out with the Scrum Clinic a couple of years back, and his family's great. So, but why us? I'll tell you what. We have wonderful partner clubs here, very very close by. Like Burlington's close by, and they're a great club. Mississauga's just over the border, and they're good competitors of ours. The Bombay Beach Club is amazing. But I will say, I think we're leaders right now in the area of individual player development. So maybe not so much for the 25-year-old, although we have wonderful coaches there who I'll touch on in just a second. But I think our programming around the individual skill development and making that individual a better player, we're probably a little bit ahead, although I know the other clubs are doing unique things themselves and catching up. If you're a 25-year-old, why our club? Well, Scott Hendry is our first grade coach. Nigel DeAker is one of our coaches. He was a Hong Kong international. Scott was a Canadian international. A guy named Steve Gittins, who was a wonderful rugby player, still is another assistant coach with the senior men. Andrea Burke is the head coach of our women's program. We've cool. got wonderful supports developing around her. So I would say, you know what? Why us? Why not be a member of a private club on a wonderful 27-acre park with outstanding coaching to develop your rugby? Right? Why not?
So what's your website? How can people find you when they move there? I mean, we've got a couple of questions left, but
just Google search Crusaders Rugby Club or Oakville Crusaders. If you Google search Crusaders Rugby, it takes you to a little club down in Canterbury, New Zealand, and
never heard of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never heard. I love it. I love the Crusaders. I know I'm not supposed to, but I love them.
It's a funny story. We think they're great, and I got an email just last week from somebody from South Africa saying, "Hey, I'd like to send my son over to experience the Crusader rugby culture," and I'm like, "Hey, that's awesome, but we're in Canada." just so you know, but Canada's a wonderful place to visit too.
Did you? So I think
he was looking for the wrong one. I never heard back from him. No.
Yeah, I've been a Crusaders fan since McCann Carter era, and kind of stick with it now, right? So
they're a machine. Yeah, super.
All right, so let's try it from a different approach.
Okay,
what are you going to do to entice somebody to give rugby a go? Like what? In Canada, we've got hockey, we've got basketball, we've got all these other sports. Here in the East Coast, at least, I'm not sure about Ontario, more further out west, there's still a lot of families, parents that are shying away from rugby because they think it's too dangerous, it's violent. What do you do when a parent comes up to you and says, my 14-year-old wants to start rugby, but I really don't want them to? Like, what's that conversation like for you?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions in there. So, honestly, so I'll talk about the sport and then I'll talk about the safety aspect. So, honestly, from a sport perspective, I believe sport is for life, right? Whether your sport's soccer, hockey, or rugby, basketball, it's for life. But very few sports allow you from 6 years old to, have your parents take you out to the local club, right? And you can still play touch rugby there at 65 or 70 years old. Like, very few sports are as siloed as we are, that you can have a lifetime experience with a group of friends, within your local community. It's obviously a physical sport, but from that comes a confidence that you can carry for the rest of your life. So you haven't played rugby in a few years, you were saying, but I'm sure you still are comfortable physically, because we get used to it. We get used to physical contact, and that gives us a confidence, as I said, that we can carry into other areas of our life, whether you're a banker or a police officer or a firefighter or or a doctor, whatever. I also think it's unique in that, again, I mentioned it being siloed, but think of how close the grassroots are to the very, very top of the game. And I think that's also very, 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 very special in our sport. So, on any given day, someone could return back to New Brunswick who plays for the national team or play professionally over in Europe, and then run around with their friends, in Fredericton or in Moncton, etc. And it's the same here. So when Andrew Ferguson comes back to Oakville to run a kicking clinic for us, it's a wonderful chance for the kids to see the top end of the sport right there. And when I was playing, a guy named Phil Murphy would come back from Europe. And by the way, there's a guy, he'll kill me for saying this, but there's a guy you should have on your show. But Phil will come back in the summer. He was a very useful guy to have on our ultimate Frisbee team when we played in those leagues to stay in shape. But, he'd be running around training with the guys, right? But then the next time we saw him, he's playing in front of packed stadiums for Perpignan and London Irish, etc. So we're so close to the top end of the sport in rugby, and I think that's incredibly special and incredibly unique. And even at the grassroots level, we have a responsibility to develop players for our provincial teams, for our universities, for our national team, now for the MLR and for the Arrows, if you're an Arrows fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you can be really, really involved and really be a big part of the process by becoming involved in rugby, whether it's as a player or administrator, as a coach. As far as the safety thing, and I'll be really quick on this, the sport and the administrators of the sport are always thinking player safety, but ultimately, you can introduce tackle techniques and different laws and those types of things. But at the end of the day, you have boys and girls, men and women, playing against each other with no helmet on, no face mask. You can see each other. You're responsible for each other. And I often say, if I see someone I played against, whether it was the Beach or the Irish or what have you, years later, I would say, oh, I used to play with that guy, right? Because, yeah, we're all playing together, even if we're wearing different colored shirts, and we're all responsible for each other's safety. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's, I think that's the most important part of player safety and keeping each other safe, whether, it's concussion-related discussions or not. So.
That's great. Like I'm listening to you talk, and it's reminiscent of a pod I had a few weeks back with Brett Bukaboom and Evan Olmsted, and oh God, he's gonna hate me, Matt Evans. And a couple of the questions I asked were, what do you do to entice people to play rugby? And you talked about the camaraderie and growing with a club, and you talked about injuries, and they all said the same thing. It's like, we were out there playing against people, with people, as you stated, and you're responsible for their safety as much as you are your own. And you don't really get that in any other sport. And it's nice to hear it from the club level, along with the professional international level as well. So that's pretty impressive. That was very well said, Kevin.
Thank you. So
you talked a lot about, the business side and the strategic plan that the Crusaders have. Where do you see the club in 15 years from now? Like, do you guys talk about that? Like, let's plan for the next 20 years in 5-year increments, or is it, 5 years at a time? What's that look like for you guys?
Thank you for that question.
Sorry, that one wasn't on the list there. So sorry.
That's okay. No. It gives me a chance to talk about. So I've been doing all the talking, but there's really 14 other people on our board who do a lot of work too. So yeah, perfect number. So Pat Daniels, our president, has come up with a strategic plan, and he allows us a lot of freedom within our buckets to kind of run with ideas. But yeah, we do have a plan. Where do we want to be? We want to be somewhere around 1,100, 1,200 members in our club. We want to be as good a developmental program as any semi-professional or amateur club in the world. That's our goal. We want to continue to keep this culture of having a great time, treating kids well, treating players really well, communicating with them positively. And we want to grow at our facilities. So, one thing that's sort of missing is we have to outsource our strength and conditioning piece for the players to a third party, and they've been wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's one town over. And if we had better facilities at Crew Park, we'd be able to do that S&C piece at the club at a really, really good price for the players. We want to build out our facilities so we can have a little office space. We want to be able to have a staff person that helps us with the admin, because heck, 1,100, 1,200 members, 1,000 members, that's a lot of people to track. We want to develop our touch programming. We want to develop, we don't think that touch rugby as a program is going to produce a whole lot of contact rugby players, but we think it's a wonderful way to grow the sport. And we think it's a wonderful, great way to engage other members of the family than necessarily the primary player, if you will.
Right.
So those are some of the things that we're eyeballing as a club. And we've got a wonderful community relations committee. We have a sponsorship and fundraising committee who have done amazing work this year and allowing us to hire and invest in equipment for players. We have a vice president who is working very, very hard to expand our coaching roster and expand the number of women who are involved in leadership roles in our club, which is great. We've got a new minis person who's helping take some of the load off. So yeah, many people doing lots of things to hopefully achieve the goals I just mentioned.
That's amazing. Just lastly, Kevin, any great club stories you can share? Like any, it could be funny, it could be serious, it could be something that you guys have done that maybe didn't get any attention. But is there something that you can tell us that what makes Crusader so special through story?
You know what? I'll go. There are lots of stories. Very few of them I feel comfortable sharing here.
It's just between you and I. We're the only ones here.
Yeah, right. I'll share this one actually. It's probably not it's not a funny story necessarily, but in the mid 90s, we were actually struggling a little bit as a club. I think we were down in 94. We were actually our senior team was relegated. We were down to about 45 members, and then I think U19, U17 team back in those days. I think there was I know there was some debt in the club. By today's standards, not a lot, but we were struggling. The parties weren't well attended. That year, someone decided to start a women's program at our club, and I shared the story more times around the club, so people have heard it. But it wasn't that well received at the beginning. It's hard to believe now, but there was a lot of talk back then about, this sport's for men, it's not for women, and all that stuff. In today's lens, you think, oh my goodness. But that women's team saved our club in a lot of ways. So they were pretty good rugby players, but they built their team the old-fashioned way, basically putting posters up around, calling on friends, hey, have you ever tried this? So they were a rookie team, but they were wonderful ambassadors for the sport. They were a lot of fun. They were very inclusive group, and it created a wonderful atmosphere at our club. And all of a sudden, the parties were better attended. More people wanted to come back out to the club. It became the sort of the place to be. We had good young male players at the time as well, so the results started to come onto the field. And also for the women's team, their results started to improve. But that women's program, at a time when the club was really down, added a kickstart that I think gave the club momentum that really is sort of carried on even to today. So we owe those ladies a debt of gratitude. I mentioned this to them at the 50th when I saw a lot of them 3 years ago.
That's awesome.
It's not a funny story, but it's an important one.
It's a beautiful story. What I like is that we've talked here for about 40 minutes, and that's the first time you've used the word inclusivity, but that's what you've talked about the entire time with the U6, right up to your club, right up to the veterans, to the returning guy, to the retired guys, to the women's program. That's one of the key drawing features I find with rugby, is that it doesn't matter what gender, what race, what you look like, what size you are. There's a spot for everybody, and everybody's accepted. It's one of those rare things in sport and society, I think, but rugby seems to do it a little bit better than anywhere else. So good on you guys.
Yeah, we attract the sport does tend to also attract a share of unique characters, which also adds a lot of great color to the environment. So
absolutely. All right. Well, Kevin, listen, it's a beautiful night out here in New Brunswick, and I think by the looks of it, looks like you got some sun coming in your window there. So I really appreciate you taking the time out on this Tuesday evening to chat with us at the Canadian Ruck, and I wish you guys nothing but the best of success and best of luck. And next time I get to Ontario, I'm definitely heading over to Oakville to watch to take in some rugby there for sure.
Thank you very much for this.
Cheers. That's awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Great stories. A lot of good laughs. Learned a lot about the Oakville Crusaders and everything that you all do for the rugby community, whether it's in Oakville or just for the greater good of rugby. It's great to see. It's great to see how well your club's thriving, even during COVID. Best of luck this year. Hopefully rugby kicks back off here soon in Ontario and around Canada, because it's been missing for far too long. So hopefully you guys are back on the pitch real soon, Kevin. Thanks for chatting with me. Really appreciate it. Coming up soon, we've got that World Cup roundtable from the women's 2014 squad that was recently inducted into the Rugby Canada Hall of Fame. We've got Dr. Summer Christie. We also have Andrea Burke, who we just confirmed that she's going to be on as well. Tommy Woods and Alicia Allaire and I are still trying to nail down a date. From there, though, just got to thank everybody for paying attention to this pod and giving feedback and making sure that these great rugby stories are getting shared out so other people can hear them, and what our Canadian rugby athletes and coaches and administration, people behind the scenes, what they do to help Canadian rugby. Thanks to Rylan, my son. He's been supplying us with our tunes for season 2. He's grade 7, and he created this music on his laptop. I really think it's pretty cool that he wanted to be part of this journey with me. So that's awesome. Thank you very much, Rylan. As always, feel free to request topics for future podcasts, guests, questions, what have you. Till next time, this is Jamie. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and most importantly, keep on rucking.